Yo, this is Rio of Madison Rising, and you're listening to Dangerous Ground Network. It's time to get dangerous, son.
This is the Dangerous Grounds Network with the 3%er Morning Show. Patriot Pride OTR. Patriot Heart Radio. The Compound. All American Radio, the #1 online radio network, 100% true American. Let's get dangerous.
Folks, this is your host. I am veteran author Doc Collins, and you're listening to Patriot Heart Radio on the Dangerous Grounds Network. Folks, I want to welcome you to week 3, Patriot Heart Radio, where we are looking behind the scenes at the upcoming novel, 1300 Hours. 1300 Hours is a romance genre novel written by myself at the suggestion of a military family life counselor, just recently exited the Army, 27 April of this year, and I'm excited to share with you all that's coming down the line from what started as an exercise, then evolved to one book, and is now the first installment of a 5-book series. You can check me out at patriotheartpress.com. And so what we've got here is a unique radio show. I'm not going to be interviewing different people from the industries, not at this point in the show anyhow, but I'm simply sharing with you a chapter at a time. And we'll discuss the elements from the previous week. Last week was a difficult chapter for me to get through emotionally. It dealt with some very harsh realities of those in the service member community. Whether directly or indirectly, we all have somebody in our lives that has chosen to take on the uniform and go to places that others don't have to defend freedom and free enterprise, and all those things that we hold true and value. So as somebody that has just recently exited the service, sharing with you the parts that have hit very, very close to me is very raw. It's very real. I appreciate your patience and your compassion. Those that listened last week specifically got to meet the female protagonist, Ava. Captain Stenberg, Ava, is the one that gives us our military perspective in this story. It's different. We didn't need another G.I. Joe, another guy that's going to come in and rescue the damsel in distress. I didn't think. And so when I'm asked, are you Dalton? I say, yes. And they say, well, it sounded like a lot of you in the Ava character. I say, yes. I am all of the characters to some extent in some like form or fashion. It's just exciting to be able to share with you a story that I hope will be considered a love letter to the veteran and mil-spouse communities. I want to thank everybody that has followed me on Facebook, searching Doc Collins, DOC, COLLINS, on Twitter at Real Doc Collins, in the Instagram world at Patriot Heart Media. And I've just been giving little tidbits to the upcoming release of 1300 Hours that will be on shelves this October. It's a hybrid published project with Author House. I'm excited, beyond excited, to share that and more with you. Again, last week, Chapter 2, just getting started. Each of these chapters have been posted to my Facebook wall. If you've not joined the email list on patriotheartpress.com, there are a few gaps that you can fill by joining that email list there. The name of the soldier that was the MP handler for the K9 character Xena that is taken over as far as the charge and care by our character Ava, Captain Stenberg, was the name of an actual soldier that my brother served with as a Marine. downrange, Corporal Aaron Seal gave his life for us, defending our freedom in Western Anbar province, and that name was used as the primary, the handler for the character Xena that is released into Ava's charge as an emotional support animal. Ava is a flight nurse in the Army working on a co-op project with the CCAT team of the Air Force. So she's a flight nurse that takes care of our guys from the battlefield to the next echelon of care, primarily Landstuhl, Germany. Many of us know people that have made that trip ahead of schedule or have taken it ourselves. And so it's a nod, respect to those crew in that profession. So just a little background from chapter 2 last week. If you have questions, you can email them to me at doc@patriotheartpress.com. That's doc, D-O-C, at patriotheartpress.com. And I will make sure to answer them as quickly as possible. Simply put a little header in there, question, Patriot Heart Radio, and I will make sure to get back to you as quickly as possible. We're going to pause for just a moment for a word from our sponsors, and we will be back very shortly for Chapter 3 of 1300 Hours.
This is Sam from Madison Rising, and you're listening to Dangerous Grounds Network.
Branded Warriors, Inc., the most beautiful, mind-indulging therapy this world has seen yet. Veteran Big Country and his crew of warriors help our great nation's heroes with positive reinforcement and tattooing. Let BWI and the power of the ink heal your mind and body. Branded Warriors, Inc., the original therapy that not only heals you, but looks badass too.
Black Rose Tattoo Shop. Veteran Rand and Branded Warriors preferred tattoo shop. BlackRoseTattoo.com. All your tattoo needs.
This is Rashad Houston, and you're listening to the Dangerous Grounds Network. Let's get dangerous.
Folks, this is veteran author Doc Collins joining you on Patriot Heart Radio, Week 3. And so we've got Chapter 2 covered. We covered a little backstory on the origins of some of the content that we shared last week. 1300 Hours will be hitting shelves thanks to Author House as a hybrid published project this October. And now I'd like to share with you Chapter 3, 1300 Hours. Predictably, Ava arrived for her physical therapy appointment about 15 minutes early. Dalton always knew when she entered the office. A buzz would stir at the hospitality center, and he could smell her distinct perfume. He'd come to love the specific combinations of soaps and essential oils she used. Every so often, one or two of the scents in her aromatic formula would make their way into his daily running around, stopping him in his tracks. The notion that she was making her way under his skin was becoming more evident to him. The whole concept that he was even the least bit conscious of her energy gave him pause. He hadn't given more than a second cup of coffee, much less an actual date, since Allison's passing. It hadn't been quite 2 years. Even the summer had felt cold to him. His few feeble attempts at engaging the fair sex were more formalities to pacify his dear friends and family, and only reinforce his preconceptions about what their expectations might be, given his backstory. He felt he was at a complete disadvantage and that others knew so much about him, whereas he knew nothing of who anyone else was or their intentions. Dalton's barber, Tommy, had even made up a profile for him on Match.com with a picture he found on his old MySpace page. The profile got so much attention that Dalton eventually had to dump the email address he'd had since high school because it had been so flooded. The physical therapy practice was the unspoken plan B in preparation for retirement. Lots of guys planned to exit professional baseball and stay on to coach or move into management. Gratitude for the physical therapist that helped him through a high school injury scare was the motivating factor to pursue the particular field while he was working his way through the local community college, eventually graduating from Virginia Commonwealth University. From the first trip to the weight room to work out with the team in middle school, Dalton was hooked on how the body moved and responded to proper training. He had observed the way that show-offs often found themselves sidelined due to injury. Dalton was patient and always maintained a steady, consistent approach to anything he gave himself to. While he and Allie were courting, she'd watch HGTV while he watched ESPN. When he would study for his exercise and physiology classes, she would scour Pinterest for design ideas that she could create out of everyday items. He loved that stuff. Interior design and having her own firm was all she'd ever talk about, if he'd let her. The mentorship Allie had with Kat of Ruth and Ollie in Richmond was more like a sister of a rock star type of thing. At least it was to her. Mike and Kat Liebschwaber had all but adopted Allie, and by default, Dalton too. Kat's flair for design and creativity manufactured a constant wave ridden by Allie, and the synergy of those ladies had always warmed Dalton's heart. He and Mike would often be reduced to errand boys and coffee delivery men as they worked in the back of the shop. Well, Dalton mainly, as Mike was more like the wise uncle that offered the brand of support that Dalton required. Nothing was out of reach, as long as he was willing to work for it. And despite Mike's optimistic and upbeat outlook, he'd taken his lumps. His greatest strength was also his greatest weakness: people. He was the master teacher of remaining vulnerable in an effort to place people first. His wisdom showed Dalton that people, above baseball, were his future. Mike and Kat's marriage modeled what Dalton and Ava strived for each morning, whether they woke up in the same state or not. Such sweet people. Dalton felt badly any time he stopped at Can on Carey Street without walking the few steps further to stick his head in to say hello. The truth was, he'd avoided Carey Street altogether for such a long time, dodging pain from years of memories. Can simply had the best fried green tomatoes, a caloric indulgence that he could more than afford. Destroying his own flesh for hours on end in the gym made him an outstanding picture of fitness, reminiscent of the old school bodybuilders of yesteryear. He's not terribly tall, but a bit of an imposing build with an unmistakable jawline that made staying undercover nearly impossible. The fact that Ava was out of the country for the whole time he was living out his career and then nightmare on national television and social media meant she had no clue who he was outside of their interaction. To her, he was the evil civilian that made her hips scream at physical therapy appointments at 1300 on Tuesdays. There was no home field advantage for either. Dalton's self-awareness was fabricating all of this based on zero actual evidence that she had an ounce of interest in him. His thought life simply staged a series of hypotheticals based on something he thought could possibly be. Her humble strength translated the moment they met. She met him not with fearlessness, but with bravery. An immediate respect was shared between them. She was trusting him, a rare commodity for someone with her past, to help her with her hips. She needed her hips to keep running and to perform her duties without the crutch of prescription medications. He loved how she explained that she never took anything stronger than ibuprofen. Ranger candy, she called it. He had to look that one up, and has since used it numerous times with other patients, often to their confusion. His patriotic admiration wasn't limited to how she earned her living in healthcare, but more how she spoke of those she served. The superficial explanations of what she had done more recently for the Army, flying wounded troops and civilians out of war zones to hospitals in Germany where they could receive rehabilitative treatment, were fascinating to him. But more than her heroic acts, it was as if they were saving her in some way. Her sense of purpose far outweighed any reimbursement or reward. In fact, she was quick to defer regarding her as ma'am or by her rank. She all but pled with the staff to please just call her by her first name. Her scarred cheeks were the balance paid for years in sun-scorched countries he'd never heard of. The rays leaving their mark on a face she had once thought of as pretty. She had a genuine love for people that shone through her own self-conscious tendencies. Despite her performance and discipline with her nutrition and grooming, she was completely dissatisfied with her appearance. She'd often refer to herself as Frump Girl from the romantic comedy My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which always made Dalton laugh out loud. That was hard to do. He didn't laugh often. More than once, he'd caught himself looking over her features, finding them uniquely appealing in a way that was strangely familiar. It didn't take long for him to determine that this woman was more heart than scars. She saved him from prolonged embarrassment when she noticed his eyes diverting to the topography of her skin by explaining that it was just a lack of sunscreen and prolonged exposure to the desert sun. And it wasn't contagious. He found her intriguingly cute from their first interaction. Pulling her shirt above her sports bra to unclasp her heart rate monitor was nothing to her, having cohabitated in a co-ed environment her entire adult life. Dalton was taken slightly aback and apologized for looking perhaps half a second longer than he thought might have been acceptable to her. Her complete disinterest in getting his attention with that behavior was what stuck with him, more than the image recorded in his memory. So many females, he could hardly call them ladies, had made much bolder attempts to disguise their pursuit of him in the past. Folks, this is veteran author Doc Collins, and you're listening to Patriot Heart Radio. We're going to pause for just a moment to catch this new single from Alison Krauss. Please enjoy.
It's knowing that your door is always open and your path is free to walk. That makes me leave my sleeping bag rolled up and stashed behind your couch. And it's knowing I'm not shackled by forgotten words and bonds and the ink stains that are dried upon some line that keeps you in the back roads by the rivers of my memory, that keeps you ever gentle on my mind. It's not clinging to the rocks and ivy planted on their columns now that bind me, or something that somebody said because they thought we fit together walking. It's just knowing that the world will not be cursing or forgiving when I walk along some railroad track and find that you're moving on the back roads by the rivers of my memory, and for hours you're just gentle on my mind. Though the wheat fields and the clotheslines and the junkyards and the highways come between us, and some other woman's crying to her mother 'cause she turned and you were gone, I still might run in silence, tears of joy might stain my face, and the summer sun might burn me till I'm blind, but not to where I cannot see you walking on the back roads by the rivers flowing gentle on my mind. You dip your cup of soup back from a gurgling, crackling cauldron in some train yard, your beard a rough and cold pile and a dirty hat pulled low across your face. Through cupped hands round a tin can, I pretend to hold you to my breast and find that you're waving from the back roads by the rivers of my memory, ever smiling, ever gentle on my mind.
Folks, you're listening to Patriot Heart Radio, and that's Allison Krauss, Gentle on My Mind. At this point, we're going to continue with Chapter 3 of 1300 Hours. Ava began her morning 12 minutes before her alarm was set to sound at 4:30. She pulled on her running shorts and sports bra while brushing her teeth in the dark. Her charged iPod and mismatched socks were tucked into her sneakers by the door, where Zena dozed until she heard the jingle of her leash. Only 6 miles this morning, because she had things to tend to before her shift at MCV, at the ER, and coffee. Lots of coffee. She was always the first customer at Alchemy Coffee, who often placed a little bowl of water out for Zena to lap at before Ava could even order her first cup of hot salvation. Her order rarely deviated from morning to morning. Just F me up was her usual if the coffee shop was empty. She always preferred local coffee shops to global chains and always over-tipped. It was a trait that frequently incited a lecture from her exes. Her past was riddled with cheap, ego-driven thrill seekers. Subconsciously, she must have bought into the opposites attract garbage that had been programmed into her mind somewhere along the way. She threw her clothes straight into the washing machine when she got back to her townhome. Zena laid down on the air conditioning vent in the hallway to cool herself as Ava docked her iPod on the speaker in the kitchen, filling the walls with UK house techno music that had kept her heart rate up since she stepped off just over an hour earlier. She showered off and whipped up the mascarpone cream cheese frosting for the carrot cake bites she made the night before for the other hospital staff. It wasn't a holiday. The occasion was simple. She needed to serve people in a way that made them happy, not just take away their pain. She saw it as the sixth love language, a way to tip the scales in favor of her fellow man. Holding the whisk for Zena to lick the remainder of the fluffy, sweet topping, she inspected her uniform for the day hanging on the dry rack in the living room next to the card table. Wearing only the towel draped around her torso, she drew the blinds closed, convinced her neighbor saw her as an exhibitionist nut. She figured them half right, at least. The pet daycare looked forward to taking Zena each morning for the last several weeks. The details of her being retired since her handler's death were still being tended to, but there was no resistance from the government to allow her to go with Ava after his service. Zena made her way through the crowd of sullen faces at the burial site to find her, refusing to leave Ava's side. They chose each other. Back at the hospital, her baked treats were reduced to mere crumbs in minutes. Ava could even see where some had shamefully dragged their finger through some frosting that had smeared on the tray. She quietly protested the state of most of the staff's personal fitness, yet remained an accomplice to work out her stress and anxiety in a way that was at least helpful to her. She skipped breakfast, guzzling iced kombucha and nibbling some edamame on the way to her physical therapy appointment. The details of his appointment before hers became blurry as it came to a close. Even he had to laugh at himself when he realized he checked his hair and his breath, making his way to the area to greet her. He couldn't help but liken the act of calling her back to getting started to ushering a beloved philanthropic celebrity away from her adoring fans. She was always so gracious with everyone. He never had to ask if she'd done her homework from visit to visit. Rather than a far-fetched excuse, she kept an annotated log in her purse. Even with the rigorous trail running and moving patients around the hospital, she was progressing, not out of the woods, but advancing steadily. Their appointment went seamlessly that day. The weather was low 70s and sunny. The clinic often experienced a high rate of no-shows on days like this one. But Ava was as reliable as death and taxes. Per usual, the work of their appointments ticked by in what felt like just moments. Dalton was sketching down a few exercises for her to take with her, as she collected up her belongings and wiped the condensation of her water bottle on her thigh. She got his attention. Dalton, it startled him as he looked up, surprised that she'd spoken his name with a question mark attached. I need to ask you something. I'm really no good at this. A lump appeared in his parched throat, and he caught himself beginning to stare at the droplets of water evaporating on her leg from the canteen in her left hand. He envisioned a dozen scenarios, from a profession of undying love, quitting, to questioning his sexual preference. The rest of my furniture is being delivered Saturday, sometime between 1000 and 1400 hours. It's all of my antiques and stuff I collected over the years from arriving from Germany. I could pay you. I'll feed you. I know I can't unpack and move it all around just so. I could pay you, or never mind. She was fidgety and sweating. She'd surrendered her usual calm, cool, and collected self. I could tell it was frighteningly uncomfortable for her. He spoke up as quickly as he could to reassure her that he'd help her out. He didn't care when it was or how long it would take. He could see how difficult it was for her to ask for his help. He truly wanted her to be glad that she had. Folks, that is chapter 3 of 1300 hours, literally in the books. As we move forward on Patriot Heart Radio, I want to encourage all of you to share the links I'll be posting on Twitter at real.collins for you to share, much like Tumblr. If you enjoy what you're hearing week to week, please leave comments on the Facebook page for Dangerous Grounds Network. I want to thank Branded Warriors Inc., bwitattoos.org for hosting this amazing opportunity. You've been listening to Patriot Heart Radio, and I am author, speaker, Doc Collins, wishing you a happy and safe week. Thank you.